Optimus Prime has appeared in 10 distinct universes. One version is pure evil. One killed children in theaters. One is still the benchmark 40 years later. Here's every single one. Let's break this down. Shattered Glass Optimus Prime. He is not a hero who went wrong. He was never a hero. Shattered Glass debuted as a Fun Publications prose story for BotCon 2008 and presented a mirror universe where every moral alignment in Transformers history is inverted. Megatron leads a noble resistance. The Decepticons fight for freedom. And Optimus Prime is the tyrannical despot those freedom fighters are trying to stop. His color scheme is the first signal. Deep purple and black where red and blue should be. His catchphrase is painted directly onto his alt mode's arrow fairing, "Till all are gone, not one, gone." But then, you look at what this Prime actually does when the story expands. He began as Optronix, a librarian so consumed by the search for meaning that when the Great Archives failed to provide answers he had no framework for accepting, he turned that failure outward. He cheated his way through Cybertronian society, constructed an ideology of conquest from the wreckage of his disillusionment, and built the Autobots as an instrument of that ideology. His sanity broke somewhere undocumented. The writers deliberately left the specific rupture off-screen. What remained talked to the suspended corpses of his defeated enemies as if they could still respond. Nobody in his own ranks had the nerve to address it. The 2021 IDW reboot sharpened him further. This Orion Pax had been close friends with Megatron before power separated them. He reinstated the Emperata torture procedure, a practice that replaced the Cybertronian's face and hands with mechanical components as punishment, and subjected Shockwave to it personally. He extracted all resources from Earth and left the planet a barren ruin. The writers confirmed his voice was intended to sound like Venger from the 1983 Dungeons & Dragons animated series, a villain coincidentally also voiced by Peter Cullen. But if the only purely evil Prime seems like the darkest corner of the franchise, wait until you learn about the version that spent 3 consecutive series being aggressively, exhaustingly nothing. Unicron, Trilogy, Optimus Prime. 3 animated series. Approximately 150 combined episodes. Like one character who never developed a single dimension beyond the description, good leader believes in his friends. Armada launched in 2002, Energon followed in 2004, Cybertron concluded in 2005, and across that entire run, this Prime died, came back, received a flight upgrade called Sonic Wing Mode, received a new combining partner, and received a sword, and none of it produced a single moment that any substantial portion of the Transformers community cites when discussing the character. But here's what makes this failure specific rather than general. The Armada premise was genuinely interesting as architecture. Minicons, small Transformers whose allegiance could shift the balance of the war, physically attached to Prime and amplified his capabilities based on cooperation. Power through alliance made tangible in the character's own body. The concept had philosophical substance. Then the writing refused to do anything with it beyond the surface. Prime died in Armada's climax and returned because death in this continuity carried no permanent weight. He died again in Energon with equivalent consequence. Cybertron gave him the Master Sword and a planet-spanning crisis, and still found nothing to say about who he was. Community polls ran on TFW 2005 and CBR across multiple years comparing every animated incarnation of the character. This version landed at the bottom of every ranking without significant dissent. One CBR feature described his Armada incarnation directly as cookie-cutter and one-dimensional against virtually every comparable version. 150 episodes of television produced no defining moment, no sustained failure, no relationship that cost him anything. He exists in franchise history as a warning about the difference between giving a Prime new vehicle modes and giving him a reason to exist. But if pure blandness seems like a benign failure, wait until you learn about the version who started his entire career by losing the fight that was supposed to define him. Transformers Animated Optimus Prime. Cartoon Network aired the first episode of Transformers Animated on September 8, 2007, and the existing fanbase responded to its Prime with immediate resistance on visual grounds. This version had a chin beneath a retractable mouthplate, a design choice that produced hundreds of forum posts across TFW 2005 and Cybertron, arguing the combination was anatomically incoherent and a fundamental violation of the character's established iconography. He was shorter than previous versions. His head was proportionally larger. He commanded not a military operation, but a space bridge repair crew operating out of a small shuttle with a limited manifest. But then you look at what that design was actually communicating. Animated Prime had been denied graduation from the Autobot Elite Guard for losing the critical engagement of his evaluation, a direct confrontation with Megatron during his final assessment that ended badly. He was reassigned to deep space maintenance as a consequence. He arrived on Earth not through strategic deployment, but through an accident involving a fragment of the Allspark he had no authorization to be carrying. Every visual choice, the smaller frame, the proportionally larger head, the repair crew instead of an army, was characterization delivered through design. This Prime looked like someone still growing into the title because the story was about growing into the title. His rivalry with Sentinel Prime, a fully credentialed Elite Guard graduate who resented Optimus specifically for receiving recognition despite having an objectively worse record, was the sharpest articulation of institutional politics any Transformers series had embedded in a central dynamic. Sentinel had done everything correctly by official measure and was being outpaced by someone who had failed the exam. The anger was structurally accurate. Cartoon Network canceled the series after 3 seasons before a planned 4th that would have paid off Sentinel's complete arc. The community grievance over that cancellation persisted for more than a decade. But if a Prime who earned his legend through failure seems like a corrective, wait until you learn about the version who inherited an entire legacy in a single film and gave everything to protect it. Optimus Primal, Rise of the Beasts, the 2023 film Transformers. Rise of the Beasts introduced Optimus Primal as the leader of the Maximals, survivors of a Cybertronian faction who had been stranded on Earth for centuries, protecting the Transwarp Key from Unicron's Herald Scourge while their numbers dwindled and their hope for return narrowed to a single possibility. Ron Perlman voiced him. He transformed into a gorilla. His introduction, arriving mid-battle to turn the tide against Terracon forces, positioned him as the second Prime in the room, separate from Optimus, equal in authority, different in everything else. But here's what made his arc in the film the most honest thing in it. So Primal wanted the Transwarp Key to take his people home to Cybertron. That was the entire weight of his centuries on Earth condensed into a single objective. When the plot required the key to be destroyed to stop Scourge from summoning Unicron, Primal had to make the call that ended his people's last realistic path home. He made it without extended deliberation. The speech he delivered to Optimus before that choice, about what it means to sacrifice everything for people who will never know what it cost, was the film's emotional center. He died in the attempt. Scourge killed him. The film did not reverse it. Primal's death was not undone by a last-minute resurrection or a sequel setup. He was gone before the credits rolled, and the surviving Maximals carried that loss out of the film without resolution. In a franchise where death almost never holds, where characters are revived across games, retcons, and alternate timelines with remarkable frequency, Primal stayed. That permanence was the entire argument his character was making. But if a Prime who died for the mission seems like a ceiling, wait until you learn about the descendant who did it first and did it with 3 decades of built-up weight behind it. Optimus Primal, Beast Wars, and Beast Machines. Beast Wars launched in April 1996 and immediately alienated a segment of the existing Transformers fanbase on multiple grounds simultaneously. The setting was prehistoric Earth rather than a recognizable war zone. The characters were animals rather than vehicles. The protagonist was a gorilla named Optimus Primal rather than the truck named Optimus Prime. The CGI animation hit groundbreaking for television in 1996, aged in ways the hand-drawn G1 animation never had to. Nothing about the surface presentation suggested this would become the most emotionally sophisticated portrayal of the Prime archetype the franchise had yet attempted. But then the writing team did something no previous Transformers series had done at sustained length. They let the losses stay. Dinobot, the most philosophically complex character in Beast Wars, and arguably in the franchise's entire animated history, died in Season 2's watershed episode Code of Hero, alone, exhausted, having burned through every resource he had to prevent a Predacon victory that would have rewritten human history. Primal could not save him. The show gave him no reversal. So subsequent episodes showed Primal processing that loss across multiple story beats without authorial absolution. Then, Season 2 put him in a room with a physical impossibility. The original G, one Optimus Prime's body, present in the timeline, spark failing. Primal reached into his predecessor's chest and reignited it manually. The act saved Earth's entire historical record and connected 40 years of franchise mythology in a single image. Beast Machines then removed every structure he had built. His guerrilla mode, gone. Cybertron conquered by Megatron's technological extremism. His crew amnesiac and traumatized. His final sacrifice dissolved him into organic energy to restore the planet's biological core. A death that the series did not walk back. But if a descendant who died permanently seems like the emotional peak of the franchise's middle era, wait until you learn about the version running in parallel to the cartoon the whole time that almost nobody talks about. G1 Marvel Comics Optimus Prime. While the Sunbow animated series was airing between 1984 and 1987, and presenting a Prime who functioned as steady authority and moral center, Marvel Comics was publishing a simultaneous alternate version of the same character that bore almost no resemblance to him in terms of interior life. The Marvel run, written primarily by Bob Budiansky across its first 4 years, and then by Simon Furman from 1988 to 1991, operated on entirely different premises about who Optimus Prime was and what the war was doing to him. But here's what makes this version the franchise's most under-acknowledged portrayal: this Prime lost. Consistently, consequentially, and without the narrative safety net the cartoon reliably provided. He was badly wounded in early issues and spent extended story time recovering rather than leading. He made tactical calls that got Autobots killed and was forced to govern in the aftermath of those decisions without immediate rehabilitation. In issue 24, he died. Not in a theatrical film with a music cue and a passing of the Matrix, but in a video game construct, his life tied to a digital simulation he chose to destroy rather than allow it to harm civilians. The decision killed him. It was quiet, specific, and carried the weight of a leader who had run out of options rather than a hero delivering a sacrifice moment. De Furman's subsequent years brought resurrections and escalation, but the foundational characterization remained consistent: a Prime who was right about the mission and uncertain about himself. The Marvel Comics never had the animated series budget or its cultural reach. They never produced a moment as broadly recognized as Rollout or Till All Are One. What they produced was a more honest document of what leading an unwinnable war actually costs. But if a comics-only Prime running in the shadows of the cartoon seems underappreciated, wait until you learn about the most architecturally ambitious version ever constructed, built to unify everything. Aligned Optimus Prime. Between 2010 and 2015, Hasbro attempted something that had never been tried in the franchise's history at that scale. A unified continuity that connected a major animated television series, 2 console video games, multiple prose novels, and supplementary comic material into a single coherent narrative. The result was the aligned continuity, and its Optimus Prime was designed to be the connective tissue holding all of it together across every medium simultaneously. But here's the scope of what that actually required. The War for Cybertron game in 2010 presented Orion Pax as a data clerk turned Autobot officer fighting a Megatron who had already corrupted the planet's core with the Dark Energon. The game's final sequence sent him to Cybertron's heart, where Primus granted him the matrix of leadership as Cybertron entered a state of forced hibernation. The Fall of Cybertron sequel in 2012 showed the evacuation, the Ark launching, the Nemesis pursuing, the planet dying behind them. 3 prose novels, Exodus, Exiles, and Retribution, filled the gaps between and after those games, with a Prime navigating quintessent interference, discovering the secrets of the 13 original Primes, and managing an Autobot faction increasingly fractured by years of displacement. Then Transformers. Prime ran on the hub from 2010 to 2013, adding every beat covered in the previous script entry: the 5-bot Earth team, the Orion Pax memory loss arc, the Emmy Awards, the Allspark sacrifice, all within this same continuity. Robots in Disguise followed as a direct sequel in 2015. The aligned continuity is the only version of Optimus Prime that required a chart to track. Its ambition exceeded every previous attempt. Whether its execution matched that ambition depended entirely on which entry point you used. But if a Prime built to unite a franchise across every medium seems like the fullest expression of the character, wait until you learn about the version that spent 13 years systematically dismantling every certainty that makes him work. IDW 2005 Optimus Prime. IDW Publishing launched its first Transformers comic continuity in 2005 and ran it continuously until 2018. 13 years, hundreds of issues, and a roster of writers that included Simon Furman, Mike Kista, and John Barber. It gave Optimus Prime more published page count than any medium in franchise history. It used that space not to celebrate him, but to interrogate whether the qualities that make him a leader are structurally separable from a specific form of authoritarianism. But here's what this Prime actually did when the page count was measured against the actions. He annexed Earth into Cybertron's protection without consulting a single human government. Not as a villain executing a conquest agenda, as a leader who concluded unilaterally that protection mattered more than consent, and that his judgment about what protection required was sufficient authorization. His own Autobots voted against the decision in council. Human institutions protested. He remained in command anyway, and governed under that weight across subsequent story arcs without the narrative granting him a clean redemption sequence. He removed his Autobot badge on 3 separate occasions when he concluded he had forfeited the right to carry it, then reclaimed it each time because the war required him to keep moving regardless of what he deserved. CBR identified this continuity as the only published Transformers run genuinely willing to examine whether Prime's certainty, the quality that makes entire armies follow him into unwinnable situations, is indistinguishable at its core from a particular kind of conviction that does not stop to ask permission. He was killed and rebuilt multiple times in ways that progressively blurred the boundary between Optimus Prime and whatever entity inhabits that body after enough deaths have accumulated. The continuity ended in 2018 with a complete line-wide reboot. His final arc remained unresolved. But if a Prime whose certainty became the villain of his own story seems like the darkest, honest portrayal, wait until you learn about the version that became the most financially successful in franchise history and the most morally unrecognizable. Live-action film. Series Optimus Prime. Michael Bay's first Transformers film opened on July 3, 2007. Its Prime stood 28 feet tall, transformed from a Peterbilt 379 semi-truck, and arrived trailing flame as the Autobot faction's announcement to Earth that the war had followed them. Peter Cullen's voice was present. The red and blue were present. Every surface signifier of the character arrived intact. 5 films and $4.8 billion in global box office later. A substantial portion of the Transformers fanbase considered this version an unrecognizable figure who had borrowed the name. But the split is worth documenting specifically rather than generally, because the community's case against Bay Prime is not simply that he was violent, it is that the violence was specific and cumulative across all 5 films. In Revenge of the Fallen, he executed a defeated Decepticon who posed no immediate threat and delivered a pun during the kill. In Dark of the Moon, he decapitated Sentinel Prime mid-speech after Sentinel was already on the ground, not in combat, not in self-defense, mid-monologue. In Age of Extinction, he backhanded Grimlock hard enough to send him airborne as a demonstration of authority. A dedicated Reddit thread titled "Is Bay Prime Actually a Villain?" accumulated over 2,000 replies across its run without landing on a consensus. The top-voted answer was, "The question is serious and the answer is unclear." The counter-argument exists and has genuine weight. This is the only Prime in franchise history who felt dangerous to the specific degree that war at that scale would require. Every other animated version carries moral authority because the story protects them from its own full implications. Bay Prime carried those implications in his hands. His final film in this continuity, The Last Knight, ended without resolution. Bumblebee and Rise of the Beasts subsequently repositioned the timeline entirely. But if a Prime who became weaponized spectacle seems like the furthest point from the origin, wait until you learn about the version that created the origin and was killed to sell toys before fandom refused to accept it. G1 cartoon Optimus Prime. The original Transformers animated series premiered on September 17, 1984. Its Optimus Prime was voiced by Peter Cullen, who received a single production direction before recording began: play him like a strong father, like John Wayne, but not a killer. Cullen built the performance on his own brother, a Marine Corps veteran whose presence projected authority through stillness rather than aggression. What emerged was a voice that sounded like command without threat, certainty without contempt. Nothing in children's action animation at the time had produced that combination. Nothing since has replaced it. But here's the decision that converted a product mascot into mythology. Hasbro killed him. The 1986 theatrical film The Transformers, the movie killed Optimus Prime in its first 20 minutes for reasons that were explicitly commercial. New toy lines required screen time that existing characters were occupying. He was shot by Megatron in an exchange lasting 4 minutes, past the matrix of leadership to Ultra Magnus with the words "till all are one," and died. Parents reported children leaving theaters unable to finish the film. Hasbro received formal written correspondence from parents documenting their children's distress in sufficient volume that the decision was reversed within months. He returned in the Season 3 episode Dark Awakening and was fully restored in Season 4. The death that was supposed to clear shelf space became the moment that proved the character was irreplaceable. Every version covered in this list exists in relationship to this one. The evil mirror of shattered glass derives its horror from the contrast with this template. The animated Prime's arc toward earning the title is only legible against the standard this version set. The IDW Comics' interrogation of his certainty is only possible because this version established certainty as his defining quality. The Bay film's departure from his moral architecture is only experienced as departure because this version is what the architecture is measured against. 40 years later, no version has replaced it. They have only answered it.